This year, the United States government will spend more money on interest payments than on its entire military. Not the debt, not the wars, not the tanks, the aircraft carriers, the nuclear arsenal, or the 140,000 troops stationed overseas. Just the interest, $1 trillion, paid to bondholders for money that was already spent, on things that already happened, by people who are no longer in office. And here is what nobody is telling you. That $1 trillion is not sitting in a vacuum. It is pulling money out of your mortgage rate, your investment returns, and the purchasing power of every dollar you have saved right now, whether you know it or not. So before you assume this is a Washington problem that has nothing to do with you, give me 8 minutes. Because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a number in DC reaches into your wallet, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. Let's start with how we got here. The U.S. national debt currently sits at $39 trillion. It has doubled in the last decade. It grows by roughly 6% every single year, and the interest on that debt has tripled in just 6 years. But before we go further, let's make sure we are talking about the same thing, because the word debt gets thrown around so loosely that most people have stopped actually hearing it. A bond is just a loan. You give the government money. They promise to pay you back with interest. Simple. Now scale that up to $39 trillion, and it stops being simple very fast. The U.S. government finances its debt the same way you finance a car. It borrows money and promises to pay it back with interest. Except, unlike your car loan, the government never actually pays it back. It just borrows more money to cover the interest on what it already borrowed, which means the debt grows, which means the interest payments grow, which means it needs to borrow more. You can probably see where this is going. In 2020, the U.S. paid $345 billion in interest. That already sounded enormous. Then interest rates went up. The debt kept growing. Last year, that number hit nearly $1 trillion. This year, it crosses $1 trillion for the first time in American history. And the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan government body that actually runs these numbers, projects that figure doubles again by 2036. $2 trillion a year, just in interest, every single year, for a decade. Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, described it like this. He said the interest payments are like plaque in the arteries, squeezing away buying power, slowly, quietly, until something gives. That is not a fringe opinion. That is one of the most successful investors alive describing what he sees happening in plain language, and most people have never heard it. Politicians from both parties have been promising to fix this for 30 years. The debt has gone up under every single one of them. There is no real plan. There is no political will. There is just the number, getting bigger every year. Here is where most videos about national debt stop. Big number, bad situation. Washington is broken. See you next time. That is not useful. What is useful is understanding the exact mechanism connecting that number in Washington to the money in your account right now. There are 3 of them, and all 3 are already running. The first one is the simplest. When the government needs to borrow money, it sells bonds. Those loans we just talked about. The more desperate the government is to borrow, the more attractive those bonds need to be, which means higher interest rates on government debt. And when government debt pays more, every other kind of borrowing in the economy has to compete with it. Your mortgage is competing with it. Your car loan is competing with it. Your credit card, already sitting at around 24% for most Americans, is priced against it. This is called crowding out. The government's borrowing need is so large it pushes the cost of money up for everyone else. You are not borrowing from the government, but you are paying for its debt every single month on every loan you carry. The second mechanism hits harder if you invest. A U.S. Treasury bond right now pays you around 4.5%. Guaranteed. Risk-free. Backed by the U.S. government, which means the stock market has to offer you considerably more than 4.5% to justify the risk of owning stocks at all. When bond yields rise, institutional money, the funds that actually move markets, rotates out of stocks and into bonds. Demand for stocks drops, valuations compress. The companies hit hardest are the ones whose value depends on future profits rather than current ones. Tech companies, AI companies, growth stocks, the kind of companies that dominate most index funds. If you own an index fund, and most people do, you own all of these companies. Which means when bond yields rise because the government needs to borrow more, your portfolio feels it directly, without anyone explaining why. The third mechanism is the one nobody wants to say out loud. The normal response to high inflation is to raise interest rates, slow spending, cool the economy, bring prices down. Textbook. Worked before. But there is a problem when your national debt is $39 trillion. If the Federal Reserve raises rates aggressively, the government's interest payments go up even faster, because the government is constantly rolling over old debt into new debt at whatever the current rate is. Higher rates mean higher interest bills, bigger deficits, more borrowing, faster debt growth, which means rates need to go higher still. This is what economists call a debt spiral. And once you are in one, there are only two exits. Option 1, raise rates, fight inflation hard, but accelerate the debt until something breaks. Option 2, keep rates low. Let inflation run quietly. The debt becomes easier to repay in nominal terms, but the real value of everything you have saved shrinks, slowly, without anyone announcing it. Argentina chose option 1. It ended in the largest sovereign default in history. Japan chose option 2. 30 years later, their debt is 260% of their economy, and their citizens have watched the yen quietly lose value ever since. Neither outcome is good. One is just louder than the other. And historically, the United States, like most governments, tends to choose the quiet one. Which brings us to something concrete. If you have $50,000 sitting in a savings account, earning 1% interest while inflation runs at 4%, you are losing $1,500 of purchasing power every single year. Not because anyone took it, because the math of inflation took it, quietly, without a single headline. That is the hidden tax, and it is already running. Here is the part most finance content skips entirely. They explain the problem, say diversify, and leave you more anxious than when you started. That is not what this is. 3 specific things worth understanding right now. Not predictions, not financial advice. A framework for thinking about your own money when the government is spending $1 trillion a year just to stay afloat. 1. Treasury bonds are worth understanding for the first time in 15 years. The 10-year U.S. Treasury is currently yielding around 4.5%. For most of the last decade, it was below 2%. That means lending money to the U.S. government, which despite everything remains the safest bet on the planet, now actually pays you something real above inflation. If you have cash sitting in a savings account earning 1%, that gap is worth knowing about. 2. In a high-rate environment, the companies that win are different. When money is cheap, future profits are worth a lot today. Growth stocks dominate. When money is expensive, current profits matter more. Companies generating real cash now, dividend payers, value stocks, energy companies, financials, tend to hold up better. If your entire portfolio is built around the last 15 years of low-rate winners, it may not be built for the next 5. 3. Inflation is the silent tax on cash. Every year that inflation runs above your savings rate, your purchasing power shrinks without anyone taking anything from you directly. The standard response is assets, things that historically hold value when the dollar loses purchasing power. Equities, real estate, commodities. Not because any of them are guaranteed, but because sitting entirely in cash when inflation is running is a guaranteed slow loss. None of this requires you to be a professional. It requires you to understand what environment you are actually operating in. Here is what $1 trillion in interest payments actually means. It does not stay in Washington. It moves through the economy like pressure through a pipe. It raises the cost of every loan you carry. It compresses the returns on every investment you hold. It forces impossible choices between inflation and collapse. And it lands, eventually, on everyone who holds dollars, carries debt, or owns assets in a market that now has to compete with government bonds yielding 4.5% risk-free. The United States is not broke. It is not defaulting tomorrow, but it is running out of room. Quietly. And the people who understand what that means and position accordingly are not the ones waiting for a headline to tell them something went wrong. Because by the time the headline comes, the move has already been made. If you want to understand what is actually happening in markets before it becomes obvious, this is where that happens. Subscribe. Because the next video covers something that connects directly to everything we just talked about, and it is one of the most misunderstood forces in the global economy. It is already written.